Sarah Mitchell had always thought of herself as reasonably healthy. She wasn't a gym rat, but she stayed active enough. Weekend hikes with her kids, walking the dog every morning, chasing after groceries in a busy parking lot. She wasn't obsessed with kale smoothies or marathons, but at 42, she figured she was doing okay. That was until the night she collapsed in her kitchen. It had been a normal Wednesday evening. Her teenage daughter, Lily, was doing homework at the kitchen table, and Sarah was stirring a pot of spaghetti sauce, chatting away about weekend plans. Without warning, the room tilted violently, and Sarah grabbed the countertop for balance. In an instant, she was on the floor. Lily screamed. The next hours were a blur. An ambulance, bright hospital lights, blood tests, the beep of machines, the scent of disinfectant so thick she could taste it. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, only fully waking when a doctor in a white coat sat by her bed, clipboard in hand. "Sarah," he said gently, "your blood sugar is dangerously high. We're diagnosing you with type 2 diabetes." "Diabetes? Her?" Sarah stared at the doctor, the words not quite sinking in. She thought about all the assumptions she had. Diabetes was for other people, the overweight, the sedentary, the unlucky. It wasn't supposed to happen to someone like her. Not someone who tried. Not someone who still bought skim milk and grilled chicken. The doctor continued, listing the usual protocol: medication, dietary restrictions, glucose monitoring. He handed her pamphlets, booklets thick with medical jargon and black and white photos of smiling seniors holding syringes. As he spoke, Sarah nodded mechanically, feeling herself fold into a smaller, quieter version of the woman she had been just hours earlier at home that night. Propped up on the couch with a water bottle and an overwhelming pile of Diabetes 101 literature, Sarah couldn't sleep. She watched the clock tick past midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Every muscle in her body seemed wired and humming. She didn't want to live her life chained to pills and needles. She wanted to fight. But how? The next morning, as a pale dawn crept through her curtains, Sarah made a decision. She would find a way to beat diabetes, without medication if she could. She owed it to herself. She owed it to her kids. And somewhere deep down, buried under the fear, was a tiny, stubborn spark of hope. Sarah sat across from her family doctor 2 days later, tapping her fingers anxiously against the sterile white table. "I want to try managing it naturally first," she said firmly. The doctor blinked at her, then gave a polite, tired smile, the kind that masked deep skepticism. "Sarah, I appreciate your determination, but type 2 diabetes is progressive. Medication is the standard of care. We don't want to risk complications. Kidney damage, vision loss, even stroke." Sarah heard every word, but her gut said something different. She had read about people who turned their diagnosis around. Real stories, not fairy tales. But it was rare. It was hard. It required a level of commitment most people couldn't sustain. "I'm asking for time," Sarah said. 3 months. Let me show you I can do it. If I fail, I'll take the meds without argument." The doctor sighed, but in the end, agreed. With heavy restrictions and a strict timeline. At home, Sarah opened her laptop and began a marathon research session. She scrolled past the gimmicks: miracle cures, detox teas, overpriced supplements, and instead dove into the real science. It all came down to 3 things: diet, movement, and stress. The next morning, she cleared out her kitchen. Gone were the cereals, the healthy granola bars packed with hidden sugar, the frozen dinners, even the low-fat yogurts she'd been tricked into believing were good for her. She filled the fridge with leafy greens, colorful peppers, avocados, wild-caught salmon, free-range. Eggs. It was not cheap. It was not easy. Her kids rebelled at first. Lily rolled her eyes at the sight of spinach omelets instead of toaster pastries. Her son, Ethan, mourned the loss of his peanut butter sandwiches. But Sarah stayed firm. "I'm doing this for all of us," she said. "You'll thank me later." The biggest battle, though, wasn't food.it, was fear. Fear of failure. Fear that she was wasting precious time playing scientist while her body silently deteriorated. There were nights Sarah cried in the shower so her kids wouldn't hear. There were mornings she stared at the blood sugar monitor, hands trembling, terrified to see the number flash up red and condemning. But each day she fought anyway. She started walking after dinner, no matter how tired she was. First half a mile, then a mile, then 3. Eventually, she added yoga in the mornings, streaming videos in her living room, her dog barking in confusion as she tried to hold a wobbly warrior pose. She learned how stress could spike blood sugar worse than a candy beard, so she meditated. 10 minutes a day, no matter what. Sometimes she sat in silence. Sometimes she whispered angry prayers into the dark. 3 weeks in, Sarah had her first tiny victory. Her fasting blood sugar dropped by 10 points. It wasn't much, but it was enough to ignite something fierce inside her. The next hurdle came when her sister, Lauren, called. "You can't will away diabetes, Sarah," Lauren said over the phone, her voice tight with concern. "Don't be stupid. You're risking your health just to prove a point." Sarah clenched the phone in her hand, fighting the urge to scream. She wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone else. She was trying to save herself from a life spent counting pills instead of moments. At the end of the call, Sarah simply said, "Watch me," and hung up. It was week 7 when Sarah hit the wall. Things had been going well, better than she ever expected. Her energy was up, her clothes fit looser, and for the first time in years, she wasn't dragging herself through the day with caffeine and stubborn exhaustion. Even her blood sugar levels, checked daily with a cautious optimism, had begun to edge downward into safer territory. But then came the week from hell. It started with her boss assigning a brutal new project, complete with late nights and impossible deadlines. Then Ethan came down with the flu. Lily got dumped by her boyfriend and stormed around the house like a thundercloud. The car broke down. The fridge started making a weird grinding sound. And just when she thought it couldn't get worse, she found herself standing at her kitchen counter at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, face to face with a half-eaten chocolate cake someone had left in the staff room and she'd brought home, just in case. She stared at it for a long time. Then she picked up a fork. She didn't even remember taking the first bite. Or the second. By the time she came to, half the cake was gone. Her hands were sticky, the fork clattered to the floor, and guilt pressed down on her chest like a 100-pound weight. The next morning, her blood sugar was higher than it had been since her diagnosis. A bold, unforgiving number that stared her down with cruel indifference. She had failed. That's what it felt like. The old voice in her head, the one she hadn't heard in weeks, started whispering, "You're not strong enough. You'll never beat this. You were always going to fail." Sarah didn't shower. She called in sick to work. She curled up in bed with the shades pulled tight, feeling the heavy, creeping fog of despair settle around her. She didn't want to fight anymore. She just wanted to disappear. It was Lily who found her later that afternoon, sitting on the floor of the laundry room, hugging her knees and staring blankly at a basket of unfolded clothes. "Mom." Lily's voice was small, uncertain. "You okay?" Sarah looked up, her eyes glassy. "I messed up," she said. "I tried so hard and I still failed. Maybe I'm just meant to be sick." Lily sat down next to her. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, in the quietest voice, she whispered, "I've never seen you fight so hard for anything. I don't care about some stupid cake. You're not sick, you're strong." Sarah felt her throat tighten. She hadn't realized how badly she needed someone, anyone, to believe in her. Later that evening, after a long shower and a glass of lemon water, she stood in front of the mirror. Her eyes were still puffy, her skin pale, but there was something different in her reflection, a fire that hadn't gone out. She picked up her glucose monitor again. She wrote the number down. Then underneath it, in capital letters, she wrote, One mistake does not erase 7 weeks of progress. The next morning, she laced up her walking shoes. She made a vegetable-packed breakfast. And she smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because she had decided to keep going. She realized something powerful that day. Healing isn't linear. But quitting? That's the only real failure. The 3-month mark loomed like a mountain peak Sarah had been climbing toward, one exhausted, determined step at a time. Every day leading up to it felt like a final exam. Like her body was silently grading her with each meal, each walk, each breath. But instead of anxiety, Sarah felt ready. She had rebuilt her days from the ground up. She no longer skipped breakfast or scarfed down energy bars in traffic. She planned her meals like a scientist, tracking fiber, watching glycemic load, learning how even the timing of her meals could influence her blood sugar. Movement was no longer optional, it was a ritual. She walked in the rain. She walked in the dark. She walked when she was tired and angry and overwhelmed. And it worked. Her blood sugar readings, once erratic and terrifying, were now consistently trending toward normal. She stopped fearing the little beeps of her glucometer. Some mornings she even smiled when she saw the results. But still, this doctor's appointment would decide everything. Sitting in the waiting room, Sarah rubbed her hands together nervously. Around her, other patients stared blankly at their phones or read old magazines. She wondered how many of them were there for the same thing. How many were told they had to manage their condition for life, as if that was the only option. She glanced at the door to the lab. "Please," she whispered under her breath, "let it be enough." 30 minutes later, she sat in the exam room while her doctor scrolled through her chart on the computer. He didn't speak for a long time. Sarah's heart pounded in her ears. She felt sweat bead on her palms. Finally, he turned to face her and smiled. "I'll be honest, Sarah. I didn't think you could do it." Her breath caught. "Your A1C is 5.6. She blinked. "That's normal. Normal. Not diabetic. Not even pre-diabetic. You did it." For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then the tears came, hot and silent, sliding down her cheeks as her shoulders shook with relief. The doctor handed her a tissue. "This is rare. Most people don't reverse type 2. They try and they get discouraged. But you stuck with it." "I just didn't want to be sick forever," she whispered. He nodded. "And now you're not. But remember, this isn't a finish line. It's a lifestyle. The moment you stop, diabetes waits. But if you keep going, it stays in remission." Sarah walked out of the clinic with the sun warming her face and a kind of peace she hadn't felt in years. IT wasn't just about numbers anymore. IT was about everything she'd reclaimed. Her energy, her confidence, her freedom. She hadn't used a single pill. No insulin. No metformin. Just relentless effort and belief in her own body's ability to heal. She climbed into her car, texted her kids the good news, and before she pulled out of the parking lot, she said it aloud, to no one and everyone, "I beat it." And she had 3 months after the diagnosis, and now 3 weeks into official remission. Sarah's life looked radically different. But it wasn't just her kitchen, her habits, or her body that had changed. It was her mindset. She had fought a battle that so many silently lose, not because they're weak, but because they're overwhelmed, misinformed, or simply unsupported. And Sarah couldn't forget that. She wouldn't forget that, so she began to speak up. First. It was small. She posted a photo on Facebook of her morning walk, captioned, 3 miles today. Diabetes in remission. But the journey continues. The comments came flooding in. "Wait, what? You reversed diabetes? How? Are you sure it's real?" Then came the private messages. A friend from college messaged her, admitting she had just been diagnosed but was terrified to tell anyone. A neighbor said her husband was struggling but didn't want to take insulin. A coworker, one she barely knew, asked if she could share the recipes that worked best for her. Sarah found herself answering questions late into the night. And slowly, she realized something. Her struggle wasn't just her own anymore, so she started a blog. Reclaiming normal. One bite, one step at a time. She didn't preach. She didn't push. She just shared what had worked, what hadn't, what made her cry, and what gave her hope. She included her grocery lists, walking routines, and the emotional walls she hit along the way. She wrote about the night with the chocolate cake. She especially wrote about that because that was the moment people related to the most. Her blog took off faster than she expected. Within 2 months, she had over 10,000 followers. People from the US, the UK, Canada, and Australia. People who were tired of quick fixes and hungry for someone real. Then, one afternoon, she received an email that stunned her. It was from a woman in Melbourne. Her name was Jess. Sarah, I cried reading your post about the night you gave up. I'm in week 2, and I've already messed up 3 times. But your story made me realize I don't have to be perfect. I just have to keep going. You saved me. Sarah sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, staring at the message through blurred vision. She had been saved once by her own determination. Now, she was helping others save themselves. And that was worth more than any number on a lab result. 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of a small crowd at a local community center, speaking at her first in-person wellness event. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm a mom who got sick and decided not to stay sick. People clapped. Some wiped away tears. I didn't beat diabetes because I'm extraordinary. I beat it because I decided not to give up. And if you remember anything from tonight, let it be this. You have more control than you've been led to believe. When the session ended, people lined up to thank her, to hug her, to ask for advice. And in every one of their faces, Sarah saw a piece of herself. The version of her who once believed she'd be chained to medication forever, and the version who now stood strong, free, and fiercely alive. She hadn't just beaten diabetes, she had rewritten the ending.